Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here. Welcome back to Tesla Daily after the weekend and a bit of a break at the end of last week. So we have a bit of catching up to do today, but we do have some news on the Tesla Cybertruck, Tesla regulatory credit situation, the full self-driving beta, Model Y, battery suppliers, and then of course some things to talk about with the election, which is coming up in the US tomorrow. So starting off with the Cybertruck, these fall into a couple of different buckets. One is news, one is rumors. So on the news side, we have Elon on Twitter responding to Holmars, who is now taking a bit of a break from Twitter. So the original tweet here that Elon is replying to has been deleted, but it did say something about when we would see updates from Elon on the Cybertruck developments over the last year since the unveiling. Elon has talked about some small changes over time, and he said, quote, "Sure, maybe in a month or so," end quote. So something to look forward to there. And then of particular interest here to potential customers in Europe for the Cybertruck, Elon responded to our Icelandic friend and Nothingless on Twitter, who said, quote, "You know that most of us who have Cybertrucks on order in Europe don't want a mini-me Wolverine Cybertruck and would gladly get extra certifications on our licenses to drive a full-sized one. Please don't assume otherwise. Getting extra certs is not a big deal," end quote. Elon replied, quote, "Didn't realize that was possible. No problem if there's a way to get current design Cybertruck approved in Europe," end quote. So I haven't looked into those regulations myself. I'm sure they probably vary country to country, but maybe a bit of an improved outlook there for potential EU customers. That's kind of the news category. Let's switch over to the rumors category. These are coming from Ride the Lightning Tesla podcast by Ryan McCaffrey. Fantastic, I'd check that out. Anyway, apparently Ryan has an unnamed source at Tesla that has a little bit more information on the current state of the Cybertruck. And I know Ryan wouldn't share it if he wasn't confident in that information, but some interesting updates here, and I think the timing as well with Elon talking about more details being shared in about a month from now. So as far as rumors go, I'd put this as relatively credible, but again, just a rumor. The most interesting thing here is on the tri-motor top-of-the-line Cybertruck, which of course at the unveiling, Tesla listed with a range of 500 plus miles, saying they intend to do better than that. So Ryan's source is now saying that internally, they are now expecting that to be about 560 miles, and by the time the vehicle is launched, they might be able to even get that a little bit higher. Again, just a rumor at this point, but I think that would be at least in line, if not ahead of most people's expectations, even with Tesla saying more than 500 miles at the unveiling, which was already almost a year ago. But based on the specifications Tesla has previously said at unveilings to actual product release, I think it would have been fair to expect maybe a 25 to 50 mile increase. So if we do actually get 60 or even a little bit more than 60 above what Tesla stated here on the Cybertruck, I definitely think that's a win. A couple of other notes from the source on the Cybertruck. Apparently there have been steering wheel changes from the prototype. I don't think that's too surprising. The prototype had a very similar concept to the Roadster prototype, where it's not actually a full circle. The source didn't say if it is now, after these updates, a full circle, but did say that it, quote, "fits the Cybertruck," end quote. So those are the couple of notes on the hardware, but the source was actually most excited for the firmware, saying that, quote, "We're not even ready for what it'll be able to do," end quote. So I won't speculate too much on that. I'll leave that for the comment section, but I think it would probably have to do with a lot of added utility from this vehicle. Obviously, we know a few things like being able to charge the ATV or power tools. At Battery Day, they mentioned looking into having HVAC in the bed so that with the cover on, it could be used for a really great camper setup. I'm sure they'll have a few interesting ways to utilize the suspension system. So even if we do get a few more details in a month, I think we'll probably have to wait until actual deliveries start to really fully understand all of these additional features. All right, next up today, we have an exciting update for Tesla in regards to regulatory credits and the situation in EU. Obviously, we know Tesla has a pooling agreement with Fiat-Chrysler, and today that agreement has expanded. So Honda Motor Company will be joining that pool with Fiat-Chrysler and Tesla, meaning all three companies' emissions numbers will be pooled together and judged as a single entity. So while we don't have confirmation of many details other than the fact that Honda is making this move, presumably they would be paying to join into this pool because they would be unable to meet the emissions requirements on their own. Per Bloomberg, quote, "The Japanese automaker's entry into the other two companies' pooled fleet won't change the conditions of a 3-year agreement reached with Tesla in 2019, a Fiat-Chrysler spokesman said," end quote. As for the impact to Tesla, I would not expect this to be as significant as the Fiat-Chrysler deal simply because of the volumes for each of these manufacturers in Europe. Fiat-Chrysler does about 1 million vehicles, a little bit more than 1 million vehicles per year in Europe, whereas Europe is actually Honda's smallest market. They only do about 150,000 vehicles in Europe each year. Depending on the emissions profile of the fleet, the credit need can be different. It might not be linear to volume, but it would seem like there would be at least some correlation. So I would guess this would maybe have, 10 to 20% of the value of the Fiat-Chrysler deal, which is believed to be about 1.8 billion euros, or a little bit over 2 billion US dollars. And of course, that was over that 3-year period. So if Honda is only over a couple years, that percentage might even be a bit smaller. So I don't know, maybe it's in the $150 million to $200 million range, which could be $25 million a quarter or so, which is a really nice boost. But I think we're going to see here that that's going to end up being a relatively small part of Tesla's earnings power over the next, 18 months. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more details about this over time. I'm sure Honda will be asked about it on their next earnings call, but probably safe to assume not quite as much of a game changer as that Fiat-Chrysler deal was. Next here is a quick update on the full self-driving beta. We have continued to see more and more videos of that surface online, and Tesla is actually now on its second iteration of the FSD Beta. I think that went out late last week, and Tesla owner Silicon Valley on Twitter said, quote, "Elon, the update feels 10 times better than the prior version. How does this UI enhance the actual improvements on the road?" End quote. And Elon said, quote, "We measure this primarily in intervention probability. This update addressed several issues, resulting in perhaps about 1/3 fewer interventions. Many of the improvements consist of fixing silly bugs versus grand eureka moments. True for most beta releases in my experience." End quote. Tesla owner Silicon Valley followed up by asking how fast they'll be rolling out these updates, and Elon said, quote, "Every 5 to 10 days, end quote. So we're at this super interesting period of time right now where Tesla has sort of turned on that data faucet. They're now collecting a lot more data than they were, obviously with just their internal beta testing. And from these tweets, it looks like just in a matter of days, that's already making a significant impact on the performance. Shockingly, I still think this is being underreported on. I haven't seen a lot of stories about the FSD beta in the mainstream media, and it's still pretty early, but I think Tesla's going to surprise a lot of people once this beta starts rolling out to more of the fleet. Next up here is an update on the Made in Germany Model Y situation. Remember at the end of last week, we talked about how a Teslarati reader had reached out to them, letting them know that Tesla had contacted them, telling them they were expecting delivery of Made in Germany Model Ys in late Q1 or early Q2. But we said to take that with a grain of salt because it was just one report, and oftentimes information coming like that is just incorrect. Well, we have another little crumb here maybe supporting that idea. Captain Vani on Twitter, which I found per Tasmanian, says, quote, "I was just informed by Austrian Tesla sales that delivery of our Made in Germany Y long-range rear-wheel drive is expected in the first half of 2021, end quote. So again, huge grain of salt here, and this could be wrong for any number of reasons, but maybe adding just a sliver of evidence to that idea presented by Teslarati last week. And just to be clear here, this says Austrian, not Australian. And interestingly, they're talking about the long-range rear-wheel drive version, so single motor variant, which is not currently being produced by Tesla and I believe cannot even currently be ordered, but could be back when the Model Y was unveiled. This person on Twitter said that the sales rep told him to call in February to discuss delivery details. We'll continue keeping an eye out for any news on that front. Next up, we have some interesting things here to talk about with battery suppliers, both Panasonic and LG making announcements last week relevant to Tesla. We'll start off with Panasonic. Last week they had their earnings report, and as part of their earnings report, they talked about their reaction to Tesla's Battery Day, and in particular, the 4680 form factor. So Panasonic's chief financial officer said, quote, "We have considerable know-how for that battery. We started working on it immediately after Tesla's Battery Day, and are also preparing to set up a prototype production line in parallel," end quote. Even with that though, they did say that they are planning to launch an additional production line at Gigafactory Nevada next year to increase production by about 10%. So it does actually look like they'll continue to also invest in the 2170 form factor, because if that were for the new 4680s, that additional production line that he mentions here, presumably that would give a much larger increase in production percent. So let's move to LG's comments and then we'll come back to this sort of topic as a whole. LG on their earnings report, per Reuters, said, quote, "It was developing, quote unquote, new form factor cylindrical batteries, which will boost energy density 5-fold and power by 6-fold without elaborating," end quote. Well, that sure sounds familiar. If we pop back over to the slides from Battery Day, we also see a new form factor cell delivering 5 times the energy and 6 times the power. Now, Reuters did say 5 times the energy density, but probably just a misinterpretation there. So Panasonic basically saying they're working on the stuff from Battery Day. LG now saying they're working on a new form factor, which is exactly the same to what Tesla announced during Battery Day. So I think the question here is how much of this is done in partnership with Tesla versus sort of these suppliers just chasing where Tesla is going. And I would have to guess it's a little bit of both. So we know Tesla wants to bring their suppliers along. That has been a consistent message from Elon. They can't do this all on their own. The portions that they are doing on their own is because they really have to do that. to advance as quickly as they want to, but Tesla's mission can be fulfilled more quickly if they bring other companies along with them. Still, obviously, if Tesla is being a main driving force of that, I think investors would hope that that would at least be somewhat beneficial to Tesla financially. But if it does open up additional capacity for Tesla and allows Tesla to grow more quickly, sell more units, then that in and of itself would be financially beneficial. So even if LG and Panasonic make these cells and they become available for other automakers, I think Tesla is confident enough in the rest of their vehicle design, their scale of production, and their autonomous capabilities that they'll be still head and shoulders above the competition and still be able to sell all the vehicles that they can produce. You might then worry about, okay, well, if other competition is a little bit closer, that reduces Tesla's pricing abilities. And I do think that's true to some extent, but you also have to listen to what Elon constantly talks about. There is an affordability constraint. So no matter how much better a Tesla vehicle is versus competition, to gain the market share and the scale that Tesla wants to achieve, they need to work their way down the price band regardless of what competition is doing. Tesla can dominate the $40,000+ vehicle category, but that's probably never going to drive 20 million vehicles per year. I would say the possible exception to that is the economic benefit of a robotaxi situation, which could actually make a vehicle like that sell in those volumes. But again, then the differentiation is occurring from Tesla's software and their autonomous capability versus just putting the 4680 cells in their vehicles. So that's kind of my thoughts on the battery supplier situation, but I do think it might be a good question for the next earnings call. How involved is Tesla in the developments of these suppliers, or how involved do they intend to be? And are there any licensing fees on that, or are there any restrictions that all those cells have to go to Tesla, or anything like that? The last point I'll make on this is just a reminder of something that Elon said during Battery Day. He was talking about the tabless construction, and he said, quote, "There's a whole bunch of things that we're keeping a little secret sauce here that we're not telling everything," end quote. I think at any given time, to assume that Tesla has shown all their cards is a faulty assumption. All right, lastly here today, as we head into the US federal election tomorrow, the tax plans of each of the candidates is being discussed a little bit more. I saw an article by Clean Technica on electric vehicle federal tax credit incentives, which pointed out that a taxpolicycenter.org analysis of Biden's tax proposal would include the point to, quote, "restore the full electric vehicle tax credit, target it to middle-income consumers, and prioritize the purchase of American-made vehicles. We assume the proposal makes the electric vehicle tax credit permanent, repeals the per manufacturer cap, and phases out the credit for taxpayers with income above $250,000, end quote. So not to wade too far into politics, but I think if Biden were to win, this would get more attention, especially as it relates to Tesla and Tesla stock. And if it were to receive enough attention, I think it may have the potential to result in a few people in the United States holding off on their purchase to see what the resolution of that tax credit is. And then especially as we head into Q1, which is just a seasonally weaker quarter for all automakers, and then we're potentially sitting there with maybe Gigafactory Berlin coming online, maybe seeing some of the updated specs on the Model Y, some of the improvements from the 4680s, cell-to-vehicle integration, single-piece casting, maybe new paints. Maybe that has a bit of an Osborne effect. If you pair some of that with seasonal weakness and then some uncertainty on the tax credit situation, and then who knows what happens with coronavirus and potential lockdowns as cases continue to rise, that could just result in some temporary weakness of demand. I think we've had quarters in the past where Tesla has felt that. Certainly no long-term concerns. And as far as the tax credit goes, I think they could mitigate some of that by saying that if there were to be a change, that it would apply retroactively. I think most of the proposals that we looked at so far have had that stipulation. But I don't know, it was just something I thought about as I was reading that article. And of course, if that tax credit did actually come back, and if there were no caps for manufacturers, though I'd be a bit skeptical on that because so far I think the proposals have still included those, just at higher caps. If there weren't, I think obviously that would be a big win for Tesla. So that's really all I have to say on that for now. Go vote. As always, thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up for notifications. Make sure you're also following me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast. And I'll see you tomorrow for the Tuesday, November 3rd episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.